Hello from Inside the Lords. My report this week is going to talk about process. Last time I talked to you, I was doing my first question on fishing, which I completely screwed up. Because I thought if you asked a question, guaranteed to get a question when you ask one, that you had a minute. Actually, you only have 30 seconds, 45 seconds. But the main thing was I didn't realise that there was a kind of procedural way of asking a question that follows a format. And I, of course, didn't ask that, so I started getting heckled by the Lib Dems. I don't think they liked what I was saying, which was that some points about Brexit, but nonetheless, I made a mess of it. Then, on Monday, I had two opportunities to speak, both of which I slightly messed up, so I thought I'd explain to you. I actually choose topics because of the content. I don't really understand the reason they're coming up, but there was one which was discussing the education and the opening of schools question, and it was down as a statement repeat. So what this is that there's a statement in the House of Commons, and then somebody says it should be repeated in the House of Lords. It has no consequence other than a minor debate. And so I thought, I get a chance to speak, put my name down, and it was only when it started that I realised that it had to be in the form of questions to the minister that she answered straight away. So I had to scribble away and change my little speech into a longer question. It is worth noting I was the only person who asked about face masks in classrooms. Everybody else avoided that like the plague. But, a slight mess up on my part. But the biggest mess up I made was in the discussion on coronavirus regulations. But I think I can be forgiven for this. And this is a process point that's at the heart of what's wrong democratically at the moment. It was a discussion on new coronavirus legislation. It was a statutory instrument. I wrote a speech, I had 3 minutes, all about the changes that have recently been announced, and that was what I was going to talk on. Then when the minister spoke, I realised that he was talking about something which had been brought in at the House of Commons in January. And in fact, here is the piece of paper from Public Health England, dated the 28th of January 2021. So I didn't assume it mattered when you're having a conversation on the 1st of March. I didn't know it was related at all. But this is a statutory instrument that was therefore never voted on, brought in in the Commons on the 28th of January, and then it meanders its way to the House of Lords. And just for the purposes of ticking a box, we get a chance to talk about it. Well, it's well out of date. So I had a problem, which was that I had a speech based on more recent legislation and announcements, and then suddenly I realised that they were talking about data sharing, medical data sharing, and isolation and quarantine, things like that. Nothing that I had prepared for at all. But of course, and so I had to rapidly rewrite my speech, which I managed to do, but it was not as coherent as my original speech. But the real problem with this is, why is it that we're bothering to go through the process of pretending that the House of Lords is sanctioning a statutory instrument which actually is out of date and out of tone with what's happening in terms of opening up? It's just so that you tick a box. And it seems to me that this is democracy made fun of. And in fact, there's been 366 statutory instruments, that have basically not had any votes on them. When Donald Trump used statutory instruments, people thought he was a dictator because he was announcing things. But this government is doing that throughout this pandemic. And at the beginning and maybe midway through, it might have been justified. But I think by this stage, it's making a mockery of any form of democratic accountability. So I've got that off my chest. I wanted to explain it to you. We start process-wise on the domestic abuse bill next week, and there are now amendments that have been drawn up, and I will speak on some of them. But it's worth noting that the government have just sent out basically a letter saying that they've accepted so many amendments that were probed at a different stage that you can see that the House of Lords is now having a disproportionate influence on the way that a bill will shape up. I disagree with the amendments that the government have accepted, but effectively I can't do anything about them because if I argue against them, I end up arguing against the whole bill. So the whole thing feels like it's stacked against us. However, having said all of that, I think it's important to note that there is a bit more life and discussion going on in the House of Lords at the moment. There's more people returning. I think just like the rest of society, people are getting ready to open up again. And I would like to say that it's not the place where I expect debates to really happen, but it gives me hope for what the Academy of Ideas does. I'm really excited to announce that we will be having a Battle of Ideas festival face-to-face in October, actually in the Westminster area, a kind of people's takeover of Westminster. We will, at that Battle of Ideas festival, not have the kind of process that we have in the House of Lords, but there are certain things that are different about the way we operate I wanted to explain to you, because we did a book launch for Andrew Doyle's free speech book last night. It was fantastic, hundreds of people, great discussion, but some of the people in the chat were saying, can't you confine it just to questions, and can't it be question to the expert or the author and then straight back again? And I want to say that's not what the Academy of Ideas does. We actually have our own process. It's just very different, which is the emphasis on saying you don't have to ask a question, you can make a point from the floor. The speakers at the front only get 5 minutes each, and then we have what's a public conversation. And what I do think is, I've learned from the House of Lords, is an over-bureaucratised process that confines debate to this kind of box-ticking, one after another form, does not allow discussion. The Battle of Ideas will be different, so I'll see you there.